order. Welcome to meeting number 66 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. And pursuant to the order of reference adopted on Wednesday, June 8th, 2022, the committee is meeting to discuss Bill C-241, an act to amend the Income Tax Act, deduction of travel expenses for tradespersons. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefits of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. And members, just before we move on to our witnesses, just a quick note. We will be setting aside 10 minutes at the end of the meeting for us to discuss our schedule when we come back from our constituency week. And now to introduce our witness, we have the MP for Essex, Mr. Chris Lewis. Welcome. And he's the sponsor, author of this piece of legislation. And the floor is yours, MP Lewis, for opening remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to each committee member. Certainly an exciting day. Been waiting for this for an awful long time. So thank you for being all ears, at least for the first 5 minutes. And let me tell you what a strange feeling it is to be on this side of the desk and not on that side of the desk. So yeah, again, extremely excited, Mr. Chair, to study Bill C-241. I just love to call it the Fair Traveling Tradespersons Bill. And what's neat and unique about this, Mr. Chair, is I don't know anyone around this table that doesn't have trades shortages, labor shortages in their ridings. We've been hearing it for a number of years now, and quite frankly, it's only getting worse. And so it brings me great pride to say that I have met with numerous trades folks, anywhere from the carpenters and the sheet metals, masonry, crane operators, electrical, water, plumbing, gas fitters, you name it. I've probably met with them. And I am yet to find, Mr. Chair, through you to the committee, I'm yet to find one, not one union and or non-unionized group that doesn't completely endorse this private member's bill. And I guess to really simplify it, it's about as simple as if I'm a businessman today and I leave Windsor and I fly to Calgary, I can write off my airplane flight, I can write off my hotel, and I can write off my meals. And there's no cap on how many times I can fly to Calgary to get business done every year. Unfortunately for our union and non-union skilled trades folks, the ones that are expected to travel across Canada to build our roads, to build our bridges, to ensure their electrical grid is solid, to work in our mines for our critical minerals. They can't do that today. And that is the fairest way that we can get them to get moving. And so, Mr. Chair, if we look across Canada, yes, there's a major labor shortage, but we also have folks such as the incredible folks that are down at the International Gordie Howe Bridge, which is that would be the largest bridge and the busiest international bridge in North America when it's completed. And 54% of those folks are not local to the area. They've come in from out of town. And so in 2024 or 2025, depending when the bridge is completed, Mr. Chair, they're going to need a home. And I'm quite certain that there's many projects from coast to coast to coast that these incredibly skilled trades workers could fill those voids, could fill those gaps. It's time to give the skilled trades workers, the skilled trades force, all of the tools, pardon the pun, the tools that they need to travel across the country and build our country and build our infrastructure. And I guess it's as simple as this. I don't know of anyone around This table, Mr. Chair, committee members, we as members of parliament that can't write off our own expenses. And if it's good enough for the folks around this table, then certainly it's good enough for our trades folks. So with that, Mr. Chair, I only used 3.5 minutes because I truthfully do want to dive into the questions. It's a very, very simple bill, and but I'm looking forward to entertaining questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, MP Lewis. I'm sure the members have many questions for you. You know how this works, but I'll just run through it. So in the first round, each party will have up to 6 minutes to ask questions. We are starting with the Conservatives, and I have MP Morantz up for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Chris, thank you very much for bringing forward this important bill. And you've identified a very serious problem, which is that if you own your own business, you can write off your expenses, but if you're a worker, a salaried construction worker, you don't have that same right. But it struck me when I was thinking about your bill that really, right now in this place, in Parliament, Conservatives are really the only party that are standing up for workers. We're standing up for workers against the paycheck taxes this government wants to levy upon them. We're standing up for workers against the tripling of the carbon tax. We're standing up for workers by Ms. Gladu's bill protecting pensions and severance. And we're standing up for workers fighting the inflation that was caused by and exacerbated by the overspending of this government. And now we have your bill, which is truly standing up for workers and saying enough is enough. We need to level the playing field. So I want to applaud you for bringing forward this bill. I think it's a very, very important one. And you mentioned in your comments that this bill will help to mitigate the effects of the labor shortage. And I'm wondering if you could expand on that prospect as well.
Well, thank you through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee member. Thank you very much for the question. So in Ontario alone, by 2025, Ontario will be short, I should say. So they'll need 350,000 more skilled trades folks, and that's just Ontario. So what this is going to allow other folks to do, you know, when I spoke with a IBEW, a gentleman from Manitoba, and he gave me some really good insight. He said that the majority of all major projects in Manitoba are from folks that traveled to Manitoba. And so what this is going to do is going to do a couple of things. It's going to allow people to actually want to travel for work. These same folks that are paying exorbitant amounts of money for fuel, for hotel rooms, for flights, and for food. It's going to incentivize them to do that. But what I also believe it will do is catch the attention of the young men and women getting into the field, give them a reason to be excited to get into this field. So coming out of high school, go find a skilled trade. Make it affordable for them so that we don't have all of the shortages going forward. So it's multi-factored, but there's a lot of opportunity, sir.
Well, thank you. And I applaud you for bringing this forward. So in terms of the affordability, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of that person. They live 120 kilometers or more from the place that their job is going to be. What impact do you think a law like this would have in making that person think, well, they might have not taken that job before, but now all of a sudden this law is in place and they say, well, yeah, it's bad enough paying $2 a liter, but at least if I can write it off, I'm saving part of that money. And it's bad enough having to pay for the hotel and traveling so far. Do you think it's going to incentivize more people to seriously consider taking that job, whereas before this law they wouldn't have done it?
Oh, I absolutely do. Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. No, I truly believe it will. And it's ironic. Just about 2 hours ago, I got another email through from a gentleman out in BC. And he said he has never, ever missed a spousal payment in his life, ever. And he's a traveling skilled tradesfolk. And he said that it's costing him an additional $1,200 per week out of pocket to travel right now. And so he said, for the first time in my life, and apparently he's been paying spousal payments for quite some time, he said, I don't want to have to miss one. I really hope your private member's bill goes through. And that was just 2 hours ago, and we have so much more testimony of these types of discussions, these types of stories, and it's going to make life just so much more affordable. People want to go to work. People are excited to go to work. They just can't afford it.
How much more time do I have, Mr. Chair?
A minute and a half.
A minute and a half. Well, again, I just, I am very excited about the prospect of this bill coming forward, and I think also this is something, is it not, that companies can say now to their workers as an added incentive to come to work for that company and say, well, we have lots of contracts, but a lot of them are outside of the 120-kilometer circumference of where our office is. But now if you come to work for us, you'll be able to take advantage of this new ability to write off your expenses. And it's just another reason to encourage people entering into the labor force.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And I would suggest that, if we look at our union halls and our skilled trades halls, a lot of these contracts that they're bidding on, per diems, all those are not actually written into the contracts. And so they need a reason to be excited to get out and get working.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you, MP Morantz. And now we'll move to the Liberals. MP Zarowitz for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to say huge thanks to MP Chris Lewis for bringing this private member's bill before us. It is with great happiness that I hear my opposition members talk about standing up for workers. This is formerly the party that brought in C-377 and C-525, which we had to repeal, and that was definitely anti-labor legislation. And also, I would hope that maybe there would be some influence of our federal colleagues on their provincial Ontario colleagues in terms of standing up for education workers whose rights are now being taken away by preemptively using the notwithstanding clause. But in any case, I'm going to focus on this piece of legislation that is before us. Mr. Lewis, I've had the true pleasure of being on this committee for a few years, and we've had a number of trade workers come before us and say it is super important for them to be able to have a certain amount of money to be able to cover their costs in terms of going through the different jurisdictions. And so they've asked of this for a number of years. So just over the last year, in our Budget Implementation Act, we implemented the labor mobility deduction, which provides $4,000 per year in tax recognition for eligible tax and temporary relocation expenses, because that has been requested by tradespeople. And I'll tell you, we had Sean Strickland from the Canada Building Trades Union. He said he applauds the Government of Canada for its support of skilled trade workers in Budget 2022, which implemented this labor mobility deduction. He said the labor mobility tax deduction for tradespeople is something we have advocated for over 2 decades, and will support working Canadians and families travel to where the work is, helping to address labor availability across the country. And then we also heard from Canadian Labour of Congress, B. Brusque, who stated that C-19's labor mobility deduction was a welcome step that would benefit workers. So you had mentioned in your opening remarks that there is an issue around labor shortage, which all of us painfully are aware of. And so what I wanted to do is ask you a specific question, and I'm hoping that I want to give you a little bit of a scenario. Because right now the bill, the way it's written, as you've proposed, doesn't require those claiming it to be working in Canada. So for example, even with a 120-kilometer distance requirement, you could have an individual who lives in Oakville take up daily work across the border in Buffalo. So in your very own riding of Essex, a skilled tradesperson living in Kingsville could travel to a work site, the west end of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the Canadian taxpayer would be footing the bill if your legislation passes. So under your bill, it would be a better deal for someone to work in Ann Arbor or Flint, Michigan than in Windsor. And so I'm concerned, and I know many others, that this may further incentivize workers living close to the border to take work in the U.S. at a time where we're facing serious labor shortages here in Canada. So can you maybe address this? Because I know that you've also talked about a worker deficit in the House. Have you received any assurance that this won't further exacerbate the issue by incentivizing those skilled workers who live close to the border to work outside the country?
Well, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the member. Thank you very much for the question. It's a very fair question. I think it's a great question. I guess the first thing I would say is, and I did work in Michigan myself for a number of years, quite a number of years. And under this bill, this is a tax deduction. So if they're working in Ann Arbor, as an example, then they're going to be paying their taxes to the United States of America, under which this bill won't work. This is no jurisdiction once they leave Canada. And so there's really no opportunity for them to write it off, to deduct it from their taxes, because they're going to have to pay all their taxes in the U.S., then it's going to come back and Canada's going to take its chunk. So it's a very, very fair question, but I don't see how it's going to apply.
I think the main point there is it might provide some incentives for people to work in the U.S. versus working here, and it doesn't help to address that labor shortage. But I appreciate your response. My next question is, the bill as it currently stands doesn't set a minimum period of relocation, nor does it lay out a clear eligible expenses. So again, I'll give you another scenario, and this could be slightly ridiculous, but it could happen. If someone were to take a 15-minute job 121 kilometers away from their ordinary place of residence, they'd be able to claim the cost of the gas it took to drive them there. They could claim meals, they could claim a hotel if they chose to stay the night, and whatever other expenses they believed were required for the job. So now, I personally don't think any tradesperson would do that on average, but it could happen the way your current legislation is written. Is there anything in the legislation that might prevent such a scenario?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be very, very clear so I can give you the most honest answer. Can you just, the last two lines, please, that you were asking about, what potentially could somebody do right off?
The way your legislation's written right now, if someone could take a 15-minute job 121 kilometers away from their residence, claim not only the cost of the gas that it took them to get there, but also claim a meal, a hotel, or any other expenses that they believe were required for the job. So basically we're saying, I'm saying, is there anything in this legislation that would actually prevent this scenario from happening?
Yeah, I think they'd be crazy to take a 50-minute job an hour or 120 kilometers away, because it's going to cost them that in fuel to get to their job. So I don't want to speculate what a skilled trade worker may or may not do, but I'd be very astounded if that was indeed the case. At the end of the day, this piece of legislation would be designed for folks that are traveling and staying out of town.
I think the point being just there's lacking some guardrails that might be needed to be put in place to ensure those things don't happen. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now we're moving to the block, and MP Saint-Marie for 6 minutes, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Lewis, merci d'être avec nous. Je tiens à saluer votre initiative. Je me souviens des débats en Chambre là, concernant... Oui.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Can you hear? Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for presenting this important bill. I remember the debates in the House, the 2 hours of debate, and I would like to sincerely pay tribute to the commitment of private members who present bills such as yours to improve the lives of workers. I think now we're studying the bill in committee, and there's a chance that it could be adopted and implemented and change people's lives. So hats off to you for that. I'd like to begin with a general question. There's your bill that allows deductions, and then there's current legislation. What do current laws allow construction workers to claim, and what would your bill change? Because we have the Budget Implementation Act that has certain measures. How is your bill different? And if you have the information, could we have an additional comparison? What exists in the U.S.? Take as much time as you need and answer whichever parts of the question you find the most interesting in this very broad question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Thank you for the question, sir. So I guess I'll address the first, I think it's your first question. So how does the existing bill that was introduced there last fall from the government, the $4,000 tax credit, so that's a tax credit. This would be a tax deduction. And I also spoke to Mr. Strickland from the CBTU, the Canada Building Trades Union, and yes, indeed, that was a great first step. The problem is the max, what we'll max that out is about $2,230. So $2,230 if they were to max it out, and that will not get people 2 months. So what I want to make sure happens is people go to work and they can go to work for a year. They're not capped as to how many times they want to go to work. The more they're out working, the better off our infrastructure, our jobs will move along, and quite frankly, the more money that they're going to be paying back to the government in taxes. I will tell you, sir, in March 2021, CBTU, so the Canada Building Trades Unions, commissioned a financial projection which estimates that a Canada-wide implementation of a skilled trades workforce mobility tax deduction would save the federal government an estimated $347 million annually through increased tax revenues and reduced reliance on EI and other government programs. I hope that begins to help.
Oui, merci. Merci, c'est très intéressant.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Are you able to make a comparison between the U.S., at the federal level of the U.S., for example, or in some states? Are there similar measures? Is this something that you looked into? And if so, is this the kind of measure, and does it have a positive impact that leads to the kind of spin-offs that were raised by the organization that produced the document that you've just quoted? Do we have comparisons that already exist to see what the potential positive impact would be of your bill? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Merci for the question. I have not personally looked into it. I'm very focused on our Canadian skilled trade workers, our Canadian skilled force, and getting projects done in Canada. So I have not looked into that. Certainly, we could always look into it and come back to you, sir, but I have not looked into that.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Just give me a minute here. Next question. Your bill focuses on the construction trade workers. Is this the kind of bill that could eventually, potentially be extended to workers from other sectors other than the construction industry?
To the member, so absolutely, it is. You know, in this almost a half-year journey, meeting with so many folks, I've had so many other people say, well, what about me? Can you include me? Oh, and by the way, what about tools? And it adds and adds and adds. What I really believe in my heart to be true is they need instant relief to get them moving, to get them working. And so what I didn't want to do is throw so many things into the bill so that nothing passes. So I was trying to keep this as simple as possible so we can have consensus around the table and get them moving. But certainly this can be added on to in the future. Thank you.
Ben, merci, c'est très intéressant.
Thank you. It's all very interesting. Now, of course, I don't believe that someone can do a 15-minute job 120 kilometers away unless the hourly rate is very high. It wouldn't be plausible, but I do think that the question was worth asking because we have to be sure that there's no abuse that could be caused by this legislation. But if somebody goes to a job site 120 kilometers away and they can ask for, they can claim costs, if they do twice the kilometers, 240, there would be higher travel costs. But to your mind, might it have been a good idea to have bigger deductions generally based on distance? Or is the 120 kilometers enough to be eligible? The further you are, the higher the travel costs. Should there have been any change based on a larger distance greater than 120 kilometers? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and how much time, sir?
You got have time for a short
I'll go
answer.
very, very
Yes.
quickly. To answer your question, sir, I use the 120. I live in a very rural area, Windsor, Essex, very rural. We have access to the 401 highway. So we can get up and down the 401 in about an hour and a half and an hour and 20 minutes, or in 120 kilometers. But as an example, Mr. Green, who's come up and spoke to me afterwards, had mentioned he lives in Hamilton, and 80 kilometers takes him an hour and a half. So I don't know that we need to get any further, because if you're an hour and a half from home, that means you're 3 hours a day traveling. You're probably going to stay out of town. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
And now we're going to the NDP, and I have MP Massey is with us via video conference. Yep. MP Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Mr. Lewis for being here and for your bill. We're in the same area. We're on a peninsula, but we also have 40,000 vehicles per day that cross over into Michigan, Ohio, and all the way up to Florida and Mexico. And so I want to actually allow you to kind of tell a little bit about the cyclical issues that we face with skilled trade workers. Often with the auto industry and others, we have really good workers that are really good trained professionals. But at times when those plants and when retooling takes place, or if we have a loss of industry, we want to make sure those individuals can keep their skills and talents in Canada. And this bill is a really important piece of that. And I'd like you to focus on that element, because during those times, we don't lose workers to other countries. We keep them in Canada if they can actually stay here, but their families and their basically their incentives are challenged with the potential of work overseas.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Massey. Thank you very much for those remarks, sir. I appreciate it, and absolutely, you know as well as I do in our area. You're right. We're kind of in a peninsula. We got an amazing, amazing workforce, as we do across Canada. But we also see, as you mentioned, sir, cyclical, and that's what's happened to the auto industry in the past, which doesn't just have to be about building a car, it's all the components that go into it. And it's building the infrastructure, such as the hydro that feeds these plants, that we need the folks there. But when that industry dries up, these folks need a place to go. They need a home. And when we have people screaming in St. John's, Newfoundland, or BC and saying, I need skilled trades, let's give these people an opportunity to get across Canada. So to your point with regard to families, it's not fun having to travel for work. I understand that. I respect that. I did it for a lot of years myself, but it's certainly not fun not getting a paycheck when you have so much to offer Canada. And so I think we need to celebrate our skilled trades on many fronts, and we have to give them the flexibility to get across this amazing, amazing country to build all the infrastructure we need going forward.
And that's actually a preference versus that of actually importing other trades or having certification that was or uncertain, whereas we have these workers and it's a small return for them in terms of your bill, but we have all that invested capital in terms of their training, going through requirements to make sure there's the proper skills, and they're actually going to be qualified versus that of foreign labor that we might have to actually import. So I really appreciate this bill because it actually is a pushback against getting, I guess, a shortcut versus that of actually having this being an incentive. And the fact of the matter is the incentive goes back to the families, which when you actually have a partner that's traveling or working abroad, they have extra costs and they're single family homes for that moment. And so this is what we've grown up and been part of our area. So I want you to highlight that because that's, I think, really important because your bill is just more about the individual trying to claim something. It's really about the family.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Mr. Massey. And, I've got so much testimonial here, and I won't dive into it, but one that comes to mind, a gentleman specifically from Windsor, and he has worked with IBEW. And he wrote me an email, and basically it said was, if the wear and tear in my vehicle, because he had to drive up to the Timmins area from Windsor, which is not a short drive. If the wear and tear in my vehicle isn't enough, what about the wear and tear on my family when I'm away, and also having the stress of knowing that I have all of these additional costs while I'm away? And so you're right, Mr. Massey, it always goes back down to compassion, understanding what the problems are, keeping our mobility, our labor industry mobile, but also giving major kudos to those folks that are willing to do the traveling, willing to make the sacrifices of their family, and giving them the support that they need. So I do appreciate you bringing that up, sir.
And I know that the kilometer element has been raised. You're open for amendments for that? Like, I mean, every legislation that we deal with, we always deal with scammers, fraudsters, and so forth. But I can tell you this much. The skilled tradespeople I know in my community and the work in the plants and the other areas, and especially during times when we've had slowdowns, they don't really look to fraud the government. So I'm less worried about that. But you're open to consideration for amendments. And again, from my experience, these are not the people that are frauding Canada. So these scenarios that are being presented, I think, are very weak versus the value that we would get for the families that would actually benefit from this type of a change.
Thank you, sir. Through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely open to amendments. What I would really hate to see happen here is this bill either gets stalled or crumpled up and thrown in the garbage over 20 kilometers, as an example. And so, yes, I want to hear from the committee. I would love to hear other ideas. But if it's on a few kilometers here and there, which at the end of the day is not a lot of money, it won't be stuck. It won't be stalled with me. I really, really, really want to see this go forward for our skilled trades, for our country, and for our infrastructure.
I appreciate that, and also the interventions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time you've given me today, and to Mr. Lewis for presenting this bill, because I know it means a lot for a lot of people in my region, but also I think across this country, because those people need to be working in Canada, not somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you, MP Massey. And members, with this, we're now moving to our second round. In this round, we're starting with the Conservatives. I have MP Chambers for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lewis, congratulations on getting your bill to this stage. It's no small feat. When we talk about supporting workers, we've got a lot of federal problems on our hands. I wonder why we keep importing provincial politics every time I turn around in this place, but we have to also remember this is being lectured by a government who introduced back-to-work legislation for Canada Post workers. They must have a short memory. But I get that it's politics, so that's okay. With respect to people potentially defrauding the government, we do have an organization called the CRA, which is supposed to enforce the tax code and have lots of auditors. In fact, they're hiring thousands of people every year. So, I mean, presumably, there would be a check in the system if someone was found to be, having expenses that seem to be not proportionate to income declared or some challenges. I mean, they would be free to be audited like anybody else, right?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe you're absolutely right, and I would be surprised if they weren't audited. I don't know of anybody in any sector that CRA doesn't audit. So I'm certainly quite convinced that they would. But perhaps I'll just take it one step further. That so many of these jobs. So as an example, sir, IBEW in Windsor. When I met with them, they told me that it would not be uncommon on a Friday to get a phone call from somebody in Hamilton, a business I'm talking, a business in Hamilton, a business in Toronto, somewhere else, and these businesses ask for 100 people. 100 people in one foul swoop. Why do I bring that up? Well, we're not talking about one-offs here. We're talking about 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 people at a time. I'm quite sure, and if somebody's getting away with something through CRA, I'm pretty sure the other 99 are not going to be very happy about it. So I have a hard time believing that that there's going to be fraud of any extent. And I know that the goodness this will do, sir, the benefit to this far, far exceeds any potential fraud.
And let's just talk about the existing tax preferences in the system. If a company pays for travel expenses, that company gets to deduct the travel expenses against the company's profit, against the company's net income, right? That's the current system. And so what you're seeking to do, or at least what the bill seeks to do, is to provide the exact same tax preference to a different taxpayer the same benefit that a large corporation or a large company who has resources also gets. Is that about the right?
You're absolutely bang on. Exactly. So that's why I like to call it the fairness bill. So at the end of the day, the company's going to get the write-off anyways. But there's many companies that actually don't pay for these deductions, don't pay for these mobility deductions, travel expenses. So it goes out of pockets. And that's why we have so many workers sitting at home saying, it's just too expensive to jump on a jet and go to work. I'd just rather stay at home and collect a paycheck from the government. So, yes, but to your point, absolutely, sir.
And I also appreciate that you're open to amendments. I think that's important to help private members' legislation get through this House. You've also received advice that, or legal advice, that this bill is different from what the government's also proposed. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. So this bill has actually a very closely in the past. It's actually been introduced. So I believe it was 80 kilometers from the past that was introduced there, but it has got clearance through the clerk's desk, through the speaker's office, that this is different enough in that it could go forward. And I'm happy that we're getting very close here, at least in discussions. I believe it's been a number of years since this has been gotten this far, as far as I understand. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the opportunity to see it through the finish line.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And now to the Liberals, MP Baker for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for being here with us and for bringing this bill forward. I mean, I think, speaking for myself, and I think for the government, frankly, I mean, I think we've demonstrated that we're very supportive of tax deductions for workers, and I say that not just in conceptual terms, but in tangible terms through Bill C-19, which was passed by the House and offers tax deductions for travel and relocation expenses and the like. So I think that gives you a sense of where I'm at. I think a lot of the members on this side are at in terms of making sure that we're supporting workers through tax deductions. I think something that like a labor mobility deduction is so supported by members on different sides of the aisle. Because we understand there's a need to train and retain skilled tradespeople. I think you've spoken to that a little bit in your responses to Mr. Morantz, and like the deduction that you're proposing in this bill, or the deduction that's in C-19 and the Budget Implementation Act. It helps to incentivize people, I think, to get in and stay in the field. And I think another important part of these jobs and the attractiveness of them is that the fact that they offer good wages and real protections, right? In large part, and I think a big part of that is workers' rights, right? Which are protected in our Charter of Rights. And if it weren't for those protections, it's hard for me to imagine that many of the workers who we're talking about here today, that C-19 helps, that your bill seeks to help, would have the wages and would have the protections that they have today if it wasn't for those protections in the Charter of Rights. So you've spoken here in the committee about how you want to encourage people to join the trades, and that's part of the intent of the bill. And so, on that point, I guess I want to ask you, like, don't you think that there's a chilling effect on Canadians who might think about getting into the trades when they see the provincial government, in this case the Premier of Ontario, using the notwithstanding clause to preemptively suspend workers' fundamental rights that are so essential to achieving the wages and the protections that we all believe in?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Baker, for your question and for your opening remarks there. And I look forward to getting the support of our Liberal colleagues as well. Going further to your question, I certainly don't. I was elected to represent Essex in the federal capacity, and I really don't have any comments with regard to the province because I'm not part of Premier Ford's team. I don't sit at their table. I don't know what discussions they've had. Therefore, I'm quite frankly not going to comment to that. What I will comment on is, and I really appreciate the fact that you were listening so keenly to my opening remarks. What I will comment on is how important it is to get our youth, the future generations, the proper training, get them exposed to skilled trades at a very, very early age. Because you're correct, sir. It's excellent wages. It's almost out of college and they got a full-time job. So that's the way we need to incentivize this. And that's another reason why I'm so proud to bring it forward.
I mean, I guess I just can't help but say, look, we've heard members of the Conservative side in their opening remarks here, at the outset, talk about how they want to support workers, and you spoke at how you want to support workers. But again, those wages and those protections, in large part, in my view, come from protections that come in the Charter. And I don't think it's okay for us to remain silent. And Mr. Lewis, respectfully, I know we want to talk about your bill, but I've heard members, all the members in this committee, all the MPs speak on provincial matters all the time, express positions on provincial matters. So I don't think the fact that we're federal MPs allows us to, or that we should allow that to prevent us from speaking up on what we believe is right. And so, I guess what I'm saying is we hear MPs on the Conservative side saying they support workers, but when the notwithstanding clause is being used by the Premier of Ontario to suspend the rights that fundamentally protect those wages and quality work that the workers have, they're silent on it. And so I guess I'm asking you, how would you square the assertions of your Conservative colleagues that they support workers when they're not willing to speak up for their fundamental rights?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Baker, again for your question. Here's how I support workers, and here's how Conservatives support workers, and I'm quite sure many people around this table. We bring solutions to the table as opposed to digging up problems. And so our solution is bring creative ideas to the table and get people working. Thank you, Chair.
MP Baker. Now we're moving to the block, and I have MP Sainte-Marie for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Pour faire du pouce.
Thank you, Chair. To piggyback on the last questions asked, Mr. Lewis, I appreciated you saying that if you had wanted to be getting into provincial politics, you would have run for provincial politics. I was not elected to assess the quality of snow clearing on the streets of Joliette, which is my riding, nor was I elected to decide how to offer health services or how nurses should be organized, but rather to ensure that Ottawa does its part for the funding. That's what's up to the federal government. When there were special laws against post-Canada workers, and ever since I've been sitting in this parliament, it's happened twice, and I was on the side of the workers. And I denounced what the federal government was doing by not respecting the basic labor laws, because at this level of administration, this is where it was happening. But my question is relating to your very important bill. There are people who live in rural areas that are remote who have a certain fear about your bill. They are saying if workers get deductions because they're coming from far to work, maybe the construction workers from our part of the country are not going to be hired before others. They're worried about competition, which will give less work to local workers on construction sites. Is this fear well-founded, and how would you answer those people to reassure them? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, sir, and thank you very much for the question. And I would suggest, first and foremost, that no, it's not well-founded. And the only reason I say that so strongly, sir, is because we have such a labor shortage in this country from coast to coast to coast that this will only benefit this area. Number two, I would say competition is a good thing. It's very healthy for democracy. It keeps people honest. It keeps companies honest. It allows the taxpayer or the tax dollar to be stretched just a touch further. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I would not be concerned about the folks in the rural areas. If anything, if their work dries up, sir, it'll give them an opportunity to go to another place as well.
Merci.
Thank you.
MP Blakey for the NDP for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lewis, for being here today and for taking on this work that has been advocated by others. I'm going to give a shout out to my former colleague, Scott Duval, who presented a similar bill a couple parliaments before this one, and of course my colleague Matthew Green from the NDP, who also presented a very similar bill. And and my own work around this table when C19 was here in order to ensure that there was, a kind of fair tax treatment, as Mr. Chambers was saying, equal to or certainly like the kind of treatment that businesses get for writing down certain kinds of expenses. So long track record of supporting this kind of work, and I thank you for your contribution to it. On the question that we've been discussing when it comes to collective bargaining rights, I mean, I do think it is disgraceful to see the notwithstanding clause abused in this way. I share Monsieur Saint-Marie's incredulity at seeing Liberals and Conservatives argue over this point, because I've watched Liberals legislate people back to work. I do think that it is a relevant federal issue because this is a precedent. The use of the notwithstanding clause can be used by the federal government as much as it can a provincial government. So if we care about workers' rights to bargain collectively in Canada, it matters when a provincial government does this, because it sets a precedent that we can use by other provinces and by the federal government. So this is not something that a province is doing that is just going to have consequences in its own jurisdiction. This is something that a province is doing that will have repercussions for workers across the country, whether it's other provincial governments or the federal government itself one day that decides to pull this kind of stunt. So I do think we should be properly concerned with this issue around this table. I don't think we can just write it off as a provincial issue. The notwithstanding clause is not simply a provincial issue. It's an issue of our Constitution, which applies rightly across the country and to all levels of government. So now you know what I think about that. And I just wanted to circle back as an IBW member and a construction electrician out of Manitoba myself. You mentioned Manitoba in your opening remarks. I mean, I recall before 2016, we had a lot of local employment. In fact, our hall was trying to get more and more people to travel to Manitoba, because we had a provincial government that was investing in infrastructure that not only meant that people were getting paid to be on publicly funded infrastructure projects in Manitoba, but we had very high private sector confidence and very high levels of private sector investment. The government changed in 2016. We saw that public financing of infrastructure projects go away. Then we started seeing a lot less private sector investment in places like downtown Winnipeg. And then we saw high levels of local employment, persistent unemployment, even as a government that was quite happy to invite non-union contractors from outside of the province to come do work in Manitoba. And so I think we also have to think about the role that governments play in funding good public works with good requirements around good pay and good benefit and good wages when we talk about whether people are going to have to travel for work and whether they have good work available to them. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry I ran out of time and we don't have time for a response.
Thank you, MP Blakey.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey.
We enjoyed your comments, and now we are moving to the Conservatives for 5 minutes. I have MP Roberts with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I am so excited, Mr. Lewis, that you're bringing this bill up, and I'll tell you what my issues are. So I have a lot of issues with long-term care. As you know, we are struggling in many provinces, especially in my backyard, with the accommodations for seniors. And a lot of my families want to keep their parents with them. So when one spouse passes away, the children will take on the responsibility of taking care of their parents. So I have a particular issue that just came up today, as a matter of fact, not knowing I was going to be on this committee. So it's a perfect question for me to ask because I'm so excited about this bill. I'm going to go back to talk to you about the shortage, the fact that we do not have enough labor to help create these accommodations. So I have a family member that contacted my office today that her father passed away about eight months ago. Her mother is still okay, but needs minimal help, but not to the capacity where we have to put her in long-term care. So she wants to adapt her home to accommodate her mother so that she could do for her mother what her mother did for her growing up. Here's the catch. So she priced out what it would cost to put an in-law suite. And she was able to shop around. The wait time, 18 months. 18 months. And I said, wow, that's a long time for them to even get started. And then you're looking at probably another 3, 4, maybe even longer months to complete it. And I said, why is that? There's a shortage. There's a shortage because there's not enough people to complete the work. So this bill would not only encourage young people and all people, women included, to get involved in the trades, but it would help with the situation that we currently have in the infrastructure, and not just in my backyard, but I think right across this country. Would you agree?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would absolutely agree. And the reason I can say that in so much confidence is I just had my basement done in my house so my children could continue to live with me and expand because they can't afford a house.
Right.
So do I ever know about how difficult it is to get skilled trades? And although they did a fantastic job, it's awfully, awfully difficult to get drywallers, to get electricians, to get carpenters. The list goes on. And so I very much respect and appreciate your story, but I would suggest that is certainly not just in the King Vaughan area. I would suggest that is across Canada.
It is. So if you, I mean, I remember, I'm probably older than most of you people here, and I can remember in high school, they used to have a program that would introduce the trades to individuals to get them encouraged, because let's be honest, not everybody can be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. So I've noticed that that's something that would encourage people to maybe get an insight into it. Would you say that if we can create an education for individuals to be attracted to the trades by providing them, hey, listen, you're not going to be out of pocket. If you do take a job that's 120 kilometers away, we will accommodate your expenses because we need them. Would you say that that would assist more individuals getting into the trades?
Absolutely, absolutely, it will assist more. And listen, we have to create a space. We have to create a place for folks to see themselves going forward. When I say folks, I'm talking young men and women. Does it ever excite me when I was at the Gordie Howe Bridge, how many young women were working in the trades?
Yeah.
That excited the heck out of me. And so here's a golden opportunity for us to, again, create a space for them to be in. They want to be there. They're excited to be there. They want to make good money, but they just need the support going forward. So absolutely, it will help that.
So how much time do I have?
Sorry about that. You've got about a minute.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm excited about this bill, and I'm also excited about the fact that you're open to amendments, but because I think not only will this benefit the province of Ontario, I think it'll benefit everyone across Canada, and I think it would encourage everyone an opportunity to get involved in the trades. So by doing something like this where people aren't going to be out of pocket, I really believe that this will help our infrastructure, especially in my community where I have a lot of seniors that, the last two and a half years have been very, very difficult for them, and they don't want to go live in a home. I'm not, I'm involved in long-term care homes because I volunteer there. I'm not saying that they're bad, but they want to stay with their family. So I really think that this bill will encourage people to work and allow the opportunity for the infrastructure to be created so that they can take care of their parents. So I applaud you for it, and I look forward to getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Roberts. And we're going to the Liberals, and MP Chattel, you'll be the last questioner for this panel, for MP Lewis.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Just to start with the Charter of Rights, the invocation of this clause that any provincial government for the right of workers, they can decide not to respect their fundamental right. This is a Charter of Rights of Canada. Of course, it is an issue for all of us. So. Very important that we all stand together to protect workers' rights. And I hope that our Conservative colleague will join their voice to ours. Monsieur le Président,
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Dans ma circonscription...
Oh, MP Massey, yes?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking for relevance, and I hope we get the same thing from the Liberal side when they actually put workers back, like the Port of Montreal.
Yes, yeah. We will provide, MP Chattel.
Because the Port of Montreal was actually legislated back to work.
Yes, MP Massey, MP Chattel has the floor.
I'm sorry, you had the floor, and I respect you, Monsieur Massey, but now I would like to be respected too. Yeah. Thank you. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, my riding as is yours, Mr. Lewis, is a rural one. And so to invest in our tradespeople is very important. So I support you completely in that. Dealing with the labor shortage in the construction trades is so important. To resolve that problem, it's so important. And that's why I really supported the deduction for labor force mobility. And I know that that labor mobility deduction is capped at $4,000. And in your case, it would be unlimited, no cap. It could be $100,000. I think that tax experts supporting the government and prudent management of spending must include some safeguards. It's very important to protect the integrity of the system. But I do congratulate you because these values to protect the rights of workers, to protect their salaries, to allow them to deduct their expenses, I share this completely. Now, as we say where I'm from, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's kind of the way we say it where I'm from. And as a tax specialist, I do have concerns. You said before that Canadians who work in the U.S. only pay taxes in the U.S. Sorry, but I have to put my tax specialist hat back on here. That's not correct. There's Section 15 of the Canada-U.S. agreement that allows Canadians to work and pay their taxes in Canada in some situations. Now, your bill would actually make it possible for Canadian workers to work on U.S. job sites. So we would be losing our tradespeople for our own construction sites in Canada. So unfortunately, I find that this is a defect in your project, in your draft bill that has to be corrected. Also, there's something else that concerns me. The deduction that's unlimited, in addition to the $4,000 deduction, allows workers to double dip. And in other words, they're claiming something twice. That's another problem in your legislation. You have to choose one of the two, not both. But I do know that conservators like triples. There is a triple deduction as well, because the employer could reimburse the employee and deduct that expense a third time in the employer's income tax declarations and returns. And so you are compensating the allocation, the allowance, but not the reimbursement of the expense. So that's a triple dipping. So this is a defect in this is a fault with your most well-intentioned piece of legislation. And I would tell you that I would support it if it were to be fiscally prudent. Because here there is a very threat to the integrity of our tax system by allowing loopholes that are quite significant. So because of those three loopholes, and the potential exodus of workers to U.S. construction sites, do you have anything that you could say to address my tax specialist concerns? Thank you.
Very short answer.
Yeah.
And that's good because I was going to dive right into the weeds on the tax side of things too. I'll answer your question with regard to losing folks to the United States. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. When I went to the States to work, every 3 years I had to get an L1A visa. You can't just go across the border and go to work just because you're a skilled trade folk. So I think that's a non-starter of a concern. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get thrown in jail over there. And the second thing I would say is we cannot live and make all decisions in fear of what might go on next. I drive a pickup truck. That doesn't mean that I couldn't speed, or it doesn't mean that I couldn't drink, and it doesn't mean that I would, all these terrible things I could do. No, I put my seatbelt on, I drive the speed limit, and I get to work and I come home. But just because it's an opportunity doesn't mean people are going to do it. Thank you, Chair.
And we want to thank MP Lewis for coming to Finance Committee for bringing your bill to us, C-241, and thank you for your testimony and the many answers to the questions that you had here today. So thank you very much, members. We're going to suspend now before we move into panel 2. Back to order. And just checking with the clerks, can you confirm that all witnesses have been tested for today's meeting and have passed the test?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Corinne and Alexandre. So with us today are witnesses we have from the Department of Finance. We have Lindsay Guire, who's the Director General, Legislation, Tax Legislation Division, Tax Policy Branch. Also with us are Mark Maxson, who's the Director of Employment and Education, Personal Income Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch, and Pierre LeBlanc, who's the Director General, Personal Income Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch. And so are we going to hear from, are the witnesses have opened some remarks? Yes, okay. So we will start with Ms. Guire for your opening remarks.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'll.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Mr. LeBlanc.
Okay. No, if that's okay with you.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I apologize. I just wasn't sure who would be making the opening remarks. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all members of the committee. for inviting us to be with you today on this very important topic. And it was really interesting to hear the debate and the discussion over the last hour, because I think it underscored the importance of this policy issue, certainly in the current labor market context. And also, I mean, I think the value of the members' contribution in bringing this bill forward. So maybe I can just start by, I mean, just reiterating, I guess, what the current law of the land is. The current tax system has a labor mobility deduction for tradespeople. Dans le budget de 2022, le gouvernement a proposé une déduction.
In the 2022 budget, the government proposed a labor mobility deduction for tradespeople. And it is similar in form and intent to what would be enacted by Bill C-241. On June 23, 2022, Parliament passed Bill C-19, which included amendments to the Income Tax Act so as to enact the labor mobility deduction for tradespeople proposed in Budget 2022.
Again, it's part of the current tax system. So when, in fact, the Canada Revenue Agency is currently finalizing forms and administrative procedures, including guidance, to allow taxpayers to claim the labor mobility deduction for the 22 tax year this coming spring. This is the time of the year when the CRA is sort of getting everything all together so they can be ready for filing season. Compared to the deduction that would be enacted by the bill you're considering today, Bill C-241, the labor mobility deduction that is already in law provides greater clarity on the definitions of some concepts and includes safeguards that contain its scope and cost. Just to give some examples, Bill C-241 doesn't define traveling expenses or construction activity and uses the term tax credit, which is not a defined term in law. And the bill also requires no minimum period of relocation, places no limit on the number of trips or the amount of expenses that could be deducted in the year, and makes no allowance for trips that might span multiple tax years. Si le projet de loi C-241 est adopté.
If Bill C-241 is adopted, it would result in two substantially similar deductions being available to taxpayers for the same purpose. This would likely result in administrative challenges for the Canada Revenue Agency and also confusion for tax filers, particularly given that the 2022 tax filing season will begin soon. So again, thank you, and we are happy to answer any questions members may have on this specific issue or on other elements of Bill C-241. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blanc, for those opening remarks and for the witnesses, all of the witnesses for being with us here today. You may have heard in our first panel, it'll be the same in our second panel, our first round, each of the parties has up to 6 minutes to ask questions of the witnesses. We're starting with the Conservatives. I have MP Morantz for 6 minutes, please.
I'll go. Are you going to go?
Yeah. MP Lawrence?
Could we just share?
Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
I just have one quick question. I don't see in 241 where it says that it's a tax credit. In fact, it adds clause Q.1 to section 8.1, which specifically says that the deduction is permissible as long as the claimant does not claim those expenses as an income deduction or a tax credit for the year under any other provision. So I just want to see if you want to clarify that remark, because this is not a tax credit. This is a tax deduction under this act.
Sure. Well, thank you for the through the chair for the question. One thing I'll turn it over to one of my colleagues, but one of the things I just wanted to emphasize too is what we have in the tax system currently is a deduction. It's not a credit. Just reflecting back on the last hour. So just as C241 is proposing a deduction,
But to
what was
clarify,
legislated in C19 is a credit. But on your question, let me turn to one of my colleagues.
Yeah, so both the existing labor mobility deduction that was implemented through the Budget Implementation Act and this deduction in C241 are both deductions. So they're both amounts that employee deducts from income, not tax credits.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that the statement that it is a tax credit was in fact incorrect in 241. I'm sharing my time with Mr. Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I appreciate everyone being here today. Got a little bit of an echo there. Could you? I failed to hear in your testimony any reason, any significant or substantial reason that that would stop this legislation from helping workers. Could you? You brought up a couple of administrative challenges, but I didn't see anything that was that would absolutely stop this legislation from helping the skilled trades who desperately need this help.
Thanks for the question. I mean, I think there are differences between the bills, and I think you've been talking about some of them for the over the last hour. There is a $4,000 limit, I mean, which was considered reasonable by the government in what's currently law. I mean, versus there's no limit proposed. I mean, we think that the safeguards in that are in current law are will allow for just a more solid measure. I think the other thing I'd add is that if just to reiterate one of the points I made, if C241 passes, then you have two deductions in law, and that's that will raise issues.
Thank you. You still didn't point to any significant issues, and the double the double relief can certainly be taken care of. That's not a really relevant issue, and that certainly can be resolved easily by the government. And we would certainly support the government in passing such legislation to resolve that quickly. And with respect to that, can you tell me the difference between $3,999 and $4,001? What makes that $4,001 shouldn't be deductible, but $3,999? What is the possible relevance of this? So sorry, I'll let you answer.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, there's not a substantive difference between the $4,000 and the next dollar. It is common in tax law for different provisions to contain maximum amounts. It's a typical practice when it comes to tax measures. It's not universal, but I mean, as Pierre mentioned, this particular amount is something that was deemed reasonable, I guess, not just by Parliament in passing C19, but it was the amount that was put forward by the CBTU in terms of their financial projections as being a typical amount. So we think it's a reasonable amount to cover most circumstances.
Thank you. So we believe for a hard-working tradesperson, it should be limited at $4,000. What about for a multi-million-dollar business owner or billionaire? What's their limit?
I mean, I guess you're talking about situations where someone is carrying on a business. So in those situations, it's a question of what's reasonable in the circumstances.
So just to be clear, let's not try and play games. There is no limit. Is that correct?
There's no dollar limit in general for business expenses. It depends on what's appropriate.
So if a hardworking skills tradesperson is going from coast to coast, building infrastructure, helping businesses get started, helping, as we heard, construct housing for long-term care facilities, they'll be capped out at $4,000 just because it's an arbitrary number, Whereas if that was a business and they were trying to deduct those same expenses for a worker who worked for them, they would not be capped. Why are we giving millionaires and billionaires a pass when we're hammering skilled trade workers?
I mean, I think the tax system is set up in such a way that, in general, deductions that people are limited in what deductions they can make in general with respect to employment income. So most expenses related to employment income are not deductible unless they're specifically enumerated exceptions in the Income Tax Act, whereas business is more of a bigger picture of what expenses are relevant to computing the profit of a business, and that builds off of accounting principles, and that's really, it's just a difference in the way the system is set up. So the deductions like this one, the deduction that was in C19 are really exceptions to the general rule that employees are not able to claim deductions against their employment income.
Just to build on Lindsay's comment.
Yeah, sorry, that's the time. We're well over time. Yeah. So now we are moving to the Liberals. I have MP McDonald for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And very interesting discussion and interesting bill to hear. And I also, coming from a small island, travel for work is obviously really important. And I think it's important for all sides of all parties, as it was put in the BIA, which is extremely important, and I was very glad to see that. But I want to, continue on with somewhat with what Mr. Lawrence said in regards to the larger corporations or the employers. And I'll go to Mr. LeBlanc maybe. In your opening remarks, you spoke about the differences between Bill C-241, the existing labor mobility deduction that was implemented through C-19. One area that I'm particularly concerned about is the lack of protections that would prevent double dipping by those corporations, possibly, by receiving compensation through an employer and via the tax credit. So I guess my concern, in line with Mr. Lawrence on the opposite side in particular, is that employers may choose to cut back on their compensation preemptively on the assumption that workers will assess this benefit as well. Am I understanding the legislation correctly? And if so, could you elaborate?
Maybe I can take this question. So as my colleague was indicating, there is kind of a general rule in the tax system in Canada that limits deductions for employees to a greater extent than for self-employed workers. And part of the rationale behind that is that there is an expectation that employers are generally going to provide employees the tools necessary to do their jobs, are going to take on some of those costs on behalf of their employees in many cases. Certainly in this context, we've understood from stakeholders that these are often workers who are not employed by a specific employer, who are rather perhaps moving from a region where they normally work with one or more employers and then taking on a job with a new employer in a different region. And in that circumstance, that new employer may not necessarily be providing reimbursements of travel expenses. They may or may not, depending on what they feel they need to do in order to attract the workforce necessary. So the bill doesn't specifically place any constraints on whether employers do or do not provide that assistance, but both Bill C-241 and the deduction that are currently in law do prevent someone from receiving an allowance for travel and also claiming the deduction. The existing Bill C-19, the existing deduction passed through Bill C-19 also includes a restriction that there can't be any reimbursement, which is in law different from an allowance. Bill C-241 doesn't include that language. But it would be sort of a question of interpretation for the Canada Revenue Agency to work through what would happen in that type of situation.
Thank you. So, as policymakers, what we're trying to do is eliminate or increase every safeguard possible for the individuals that we're talking about, and those are the construction workers. So I think, at the end of the day, we talk about our labor market, we talk about We had even talked a little bit about education and the lack thereof of K to 12 and the trades being incorporated into the education system. So I guess, and your answer obviously puts a flag up to say, how can we eliminate those possibilities? And there's many other cases with this bill. And there's, I think it's great that we brought this forth and we're moving in this direction, but no cap on the amount of expenses is a very interesting one. If you travel on Prince Edward Island, 120 kilometers pretty near takes you from one end of the island to the other. So I guess, are there any additional safeguards in C19's labor mobility deduction that aren't included in C241 and could elaborate on those? So could you just give us a list of those items that you're aware of that could present challenges?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So as you mentioned, there is a $4,000 cap in the existing deduction. There's also a restriction that effectively says you can't deduct more than you earned from the job, more than half of the income you earned from the job, in fact. And the idea there is essentially that, we recognize that people travel for a variety of reasons all the time. And I think we would all think it reasonable that, people who are choosing to incur expenses to earn income, they aren't going to do that. They aren't going to travel just to earn income if they're going to spend more on the travel than they did on the expenses to get there. So this just provides sort of a simple catch to make sure that, we have this indication that the person was actually earning income from the travel that was significant relative to the expenses they incurred. There's also a restriction in the existing deduction that limits it to a minimum travel of 36 hours, which speaks to, what we heard from stakeholders in terms of being able to move for temporary jobs and projects away from where they normally live, as opposed to sort of just ordinary commuting that, all employees may have commuting expenses and some people may live far from where they work. But those aren't typically deductible to most taxpayers, and that's not really the gap that this provision was meant to address. Finally, I guess I would flag there's one provision that says that the deduction is available for travel to a work site in a city where the individual isn't normally working. So again, this was getting at the sense that this is about traveling away for temporary jobs, and it's not sort of commuting to your day-to-day job that you normally work at. That latter provision was modeled after an existing rule in the tax recognition for the U.S.
Maxon, thank you, MP MacDonald. And now to the block, and MP Samari, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, Messieurs Leblanc.
Thank you, Chair. Messrs. LeBlanc, Maxim, Ms. McGuire, thank you for being here and for being willing to answer our question. Mr. LeBlanc, thank you for the preamble, and thanks to all three of you for the information that you will be providing to the committee. Obviously, the purpose of any committee's deliberations is to improve bills to ensure that legislation fulfills the objectives intended and to amend them as necessary so that they can be as good as possible. Along those lines, I was somewhat surprised, Mr. LeBlanc, when at the beginning of your presentation you said that the bill refers to several terms that are not defined. Well, as framers of legislation, when we work on a bill, we work with law clerks, team, and if the terms are not defined in the Tax Act, for example, it would be best for them to be defined in the bill. If, according to senior officials, there are problems with definitions, I think it would be important for your department or your team to provide to the committee the technical details, such as the terms that should be defined. So please send them to us and see what definitions you could propose so that we could make amendments if necessary so as to improve and clarify the draft legislation. And also I have a message for the government party I think in the committee work culture, it's important to take bills, private members' bills, seriously, or opposition members' bills seriously, because I think, if the draft legislation comes to a committee, it could end up in the House. So if the government party sees technicality issues and applicability issues, and, the work in the House of Commons does require these to be just what they should be dealt with and negotiated here. I imagine, Mr. LeBlanc, if you could provide in writing to this committee the definitions that could be included, the issues in terms of applicability, the technical issues that would be problematic for your department with this piece of legislation, I think it would be important. And then all parties together between sessions we could work together so as to see whether, according to Mr. Lewis and colleagues, it is worth adopting these clarificatory amendments so as to have a better bill and have it more quickly. Also, Mr. LeBlanc and colleagues, you raise the issue of the double deduction. When Mr. Lewis presented his legislation, his bill, to the House, the Budget Implementation Act had not yet been presented. So, of course, these things were happening in parallel, and so there's a collateral impact that we have two competitive bills where the deductions could add up. I'm sure that was not the intent of this bill because it was tabled in the House before the Budget Implementation Act was tabled. Similarly, Mr. LeBlanc and team, if there's some formulation for an amendment that could be made, if, for example, if C241 is implemented, how can we ensure that the part that's in the Budget Implementation Act, which doesn't allow, so that we don't have a double deduction? So those are a lot of comments, but there are a lot of requests in what I'm saying to you. But I also have a technical question, which is not necessarily easy to answer. I imagine that the House has not had two similar pieces of legislation passed reasonably close to each other, opening up the way to double deduction that wasn't intended. I can't imagine this is the first time. Do you have any knowledge of this having been the case in the past? And if so, what solutions were made or introduced by the House? Thank you.
Merci pour les questions.
Thank you for the questions. I don't know whether my colleagues would like to answer, but I can think of one similar case, but perhaps I could leave the floor to my colleagues.
I can't offhand think of a specific example. I think it might be important to clarify that both of the deductions do provide that expenses that are deducted under one cannot be deducted under the other. So the same expense wouldn't be able to be deducted twice under the two different deductions. The concern is more that there are two different deductions in the Income Tax Act that have very similar purposes and apply in many of the same situations and very similar situations. So from an administrative perspective and from a public confusion perspective, that's the concern.
OK, ben merci pour la réponse.
Thank you for this answer. I think that here in committee we will have to clarify this element. So is my time up, Chair? I have 30 seconds. I would leave them and I'll wait for my next turn. Thank you very much.
See MP Samari, and we're moving to your partner next to you there, NDP member MP Blakey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't think there's a lot to say that hasn't already been said, but I do think that one of our tasks here is to try and appreciate the differences between what was passed in C19 and what's proposed in 241. A thank you to our committee analysts who prepared a pretty decent table, I think, that lays them side by side. I want to just kind of walk through that table while we have the government's own tax experts here so that they can give us a sense of what these differences in the table will kind of practically mean for folks who are filling out a tax return. So in terms of characteristics to compare between the two acts, the first in the table are conditions related to the taxpayer. So in the C19 version, You have to be an eligible trade person, earn employment income as a tradesperson or apprentice in the construction activities referred to, and then there's a regulation that kind of defines that. In 241, you have to be employed as a qualified tradesperson or an indentured apprentice for construction activities at a job site. Is there any real practical difference in those two definitions that the committee should be aware of?
I guess I can give a first answer, but others may wish to jump in. In terms of practical differences, it's challenging to lay out the concrete implications. I think one of the difficulties in terms of lacking some definitions is that eventually that means that the Canada Revenue Agency will be required to put forward interpretation and guidance as to what the different terms mean, and that's not something that we ourselves can do. So just as an example, Bill C-19 defines construction activity, and Bill C-241 does not. So in the case of Bill C-241, the CRA would have to put forward guidance in terms of exactly what that means. So whether it ends up being different in certain cases is hard for us to say, and that would be true of certain other undefined terms as well. So that's kind of just a potential confusion for the taxpayer question.
Okay. It is possible that the CRA could adopt the same regulation as is identified in C-19 as a way of interpreting what's in 241. So in terms of minimum required distance, I think that one's pretty straightforward. There is a slight difference in the distance, but we're talking about a 30-kilometer difference. Another main characteristic is the distance calculation method. So in the table, it says that under the existing law, it's calculated on the one hand between the ordinary residence and each temporary work location, or on the other hand, between each temporary lodging and each temporary work location. Whereas in 241, it's calculated between the ordinary place of residence and the job site. So are there any kind of practical implications for those differences?
So this is again a place where the CRA would have to ultimately interpret the language, but one possible implication is that so the language under the existing deduction is explicitly intended to say, you moved closer to the work site, so you found temporary lodging that was closer to the work site than your home was. Bill C-241, if the work site is at least 120 kilometers away from where you live, travel to and from the work site is deductible. It's unclear to me whether that means that if you do have lodging near the work site, you can deduct your commuting expenses back and forth from your temporary lodging to that work site that might be 15 kilometers because that work site is 120 kilometers away from your home. So I don't know if that's the intention or not, but that would be one possible difference. The existing deduction is only for travel between your home and the work site.
In the case of what's on the books currently, like if I was living in Winnipeg, but I was working a job in Brandon and I was commuting every day, then I could deduct my gas, for instance. But if I rented a place in Brandon in order to be able to go do that job and not commute all the time, say I just drove out there Sunday night and then I drove home Friday evening, then I wouldn't be able to claim my gas from the place that I had rented in Brandon to the job site every day. I would only be able to claim the initial travel from Winnipeg to Brandon and then Brandon back to Winnipeg. Am I understanding that properly?
Yeah, so I mean, not if it was every day necessarily, but the distance from Winnipeg to Brandon to that lodging, you would be sort of a one-time amount that would be deductible. But once you're in Brandon, your travel between your lodging and the work site would be just ordinary commuting like any other taxpayer, and that would not be deductible.
Okay. But is 241 any different in that respect, or would it likely operate in the same way?
That's unclear to me. It says travel to and from the job site, provided that the job site is 120 kilometers away from home. It would be a question of interpretation, perhaps, whether that's to and from the job site only from home, or whether that could be to and from the job site from the temporary lodging.
Okay, so that'd be something,
it's unclear to me.
Something that the CRA could provide guidance on, right?
One way or the other, they would probably have to provide guidance, yeah.
In the other, so there's a few more items in the table, and I know I'm running up against time, so if I'm out of time, Mr. Chair, that's fine. Perhaps we can continue in my next time, but I do find the more detailed discussion helpful in terms of understanding what the differences are and how they would be mediated.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think that's very good, MP Blakey, and that was helpful from the witnesses, from our officials. We are now members moving into the second round, but it's going to be, as we've done before, a curtailed second round. It's going to be three. Let's see, what do I have here? About 3-ish minutes per party. So each party will have 3+ minutes, and we're starting with the Conservatives. I do have the sponsor of the bill, MP Lewis, for the 3+ minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses here. Well, I appreciate it. Just a few questions here. So, in my testimony, I had mentioned that CBTU did a study, commissioned a financial projection, which estimates that Canada-wide implementation of a skilled trades workforce mobility tax deduction would save the federal government an estimated $347 million annually. Subsequently, Bill C-222, which was introduced, or perhaps wasn't even introduced yet, this is Mr. Green's bill, but the Parliamentary Budget Officer issued a legislative costing note on Bill C-222, which is very similar to 241, on the 5th of April 2022, estimating the cost of this measure is in 22 to 23 is 117 million, and its 5-year cost at 522 million. So my question is, does it not make sense to keep the money in the pockets of the skilled trade worker if the government's going to rake in 347 million and it's only going to cost them 117 a year? Mr. Maxim.
Well, the particular financial projection of the CBTU assumed that for the purpose of a costing, that about 10% of construction workers would relocate each year. Their estimate of savings from reduced draw on EI was based on the same population of people who, based on their estimates, were already moving. So it was somewhat unclear to me in that estimate of savings whether they were basing that on an actual change in behavior, since these were the people that they assumed were already moving. So if
I'm sorry, I just
there was some question in my mind.
Yeah, very well, thank you. Just to your point with Mr. Blakey, it is spelled out that it's 120 kilometers from home. So that's not a round trip of 60 kilometers each way. It's 120 kilometers from your place of residence. Just for clarification, the last question I always have is, and I know it's somewhat facetious, and I'm not trying to be funny, but does it not make sense then that if we're going to put a cap on how much they can deduct a year, and then they can't go to work, would it not make sense that they're probably going to end up on EI if they run out of work? Would it not be cheaper to keep the pockets, therefore make them pay more taxes at the end of the year, give them the flexibility to get across Canada to build our bridges and keep them off EI? Thank you, Chair.
I mean, the question there would be, would the increase or would the removal in the limit result in that much increased economic activity? I mean, I think we could say that, often, the government is clear in putting this forward and putting this into law as passed by Parliament, that this will have a positive economic impact, which could somewhat reduce the cost of the measure. We don't think it's very common that measures more than pay for themselves.
MP Lewis, and now to the Liberals, MP Zarowitz for 3+ minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the officials for being with us today. Thank you, and thanks for your great work on this. I had mentioned in my first hour the risk that this bill doesn't require those claiming to be working in Canada. So we've been talking about labor shortages, and so my concern is that the way the bill's written right now, I could be an individual who lives in, say, Oakville, but actually work on the other side of the border. So we might be losing people so we don't sort of address the labor shortage issue. They can actually work in the U.S., but actually their expenses could be actually paid for by Canadians under this bill. Am I right in reading that? Is that actually a possibility given the way the bill is actually written right now?
So you're right that there is nothing in the bill that prevents or that requires the work location to be in Canada. So yes, it's possible that the deduction could be claimed in respect of someone who is commuting to the U.S. for work. In those circumstances, it would really depend on all the facts, whether that person would be subject to Canadian tax or not on that income. But the deduction, it's not limited to just income from that particular employment. It's a general deduction from income. So yeah, it's conceivable that someone could be working in the U.S., potentially paying U.S. tax depending on the facts on that income, and claiming a deduction in Canada.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had asked, and I didn't mean to sort of be silly, where I said, under the way that the bill's currently written, someone could actually take a 50-minute job 121 kilometers away and be able to claim the cost of the gas, meals, hotels, and any other expenses that they believe were required for the job. And I think as legislators and as people who are policymakers, it's our job to make sure that we have airtight legislation that's going to ensure that it does what it is we want people to do, as opposed to someone saying, well, the law allows me to do this, so if the law allows me to do it, I'm just going to do it. I could see a situation where someone says, well, I have a cottage 2 hours away, or 121 kilometers away, that's under construction. I'm a plumber. I'm going to go over there and just look at it. Oh, my neighbor happens to tell me that they need their, their I don't know, pipes sort of checked. So for 15 minutes, I do a job over there. And then what happens is then I head back home. And if the way the law is written right now, the way the legislation is proposed right now, I would probably say, well, the law allows me to do this. So if the law allows me to do this, I might as well claim my gas and claim, well, I had a meal while I was there. And, oh, I had to stay overnight because by the time I thought about going back, it was fairly late. And there might be some other expenses. Am I right to believe that the way the law is written, it would actually allow me to be able to do that under the scenario I just gave you?
Short answer, please.
I'm at 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
No, it's yeah, we're only going 3 minutes. No, you're at 3 minutes and 15.
No, 2:20. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Guire, or whomever wants to answer.
Sure, I can answer, and Mark can chime in if there's anything. But I mean, yes, I think the main requirement in the deduction is that the person is traveling 120 kilometers away from their home. So unlike the deduction that's in law right now, there aren't safeguards to limit the circumstances in which the deduction can be claimed beyond that requirement to travel 120 kilometers for the work.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I apologize. I started my time 1 minute late. I'm so sorry about that.
So we're going to MP Samari, please. Thank you.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Je commence.
Yes, Chair. I would like to begin by repeating my confidence, my full confidence in the way you're managing this committee. In the first hour of debate, our esteemed colleague Sophie Châtel raised several elements regarding this bill. And as I said in my previous round, our purpose here is to improve the bill and to make sure that it fulfills its objectives. So I'd like to see whether you have any comments to make. One of the elements that was raised was whether C-241 is passed, and with C-19, there would be 2 deductions. So we know this, and we know that there has to be a solution found. And she said that a worker could claim expenses for travel to the U.S. if the worker is going to work in the U.S. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And if there was a wish to limit that sort of spending to go and work abroad, how could we proceed? Again, if you don't have any immediate answer, you could submit to us in writing. In addition, In the Act, it says if management gives an allowance for travel for a worker, the worker cannot deduct that. But if it's not an allowance, but another form of payment for expenditures, do you see a door there to any abuse? And if so, how could the bill be improved to close the door on that? Thank you.
So to start with the double deduction point, so both deductions would, as I mentioned earlier, apply in very similar circumstances. They both do have restrictions on being able to deduct amounts that have been deducted under other provisions of the Income Tax Act. So the same expense would not be able to be deducted under both of the deductions. In terms of being able to go and travel abroad, so as I mentioned, there's no restriction in 241 as to where the workplace needs to be located. So C19, the existing law, does require that the work location be in Canada. So that's there to address that issue of someone going to work in another country and claim the deduction. And then on the last point, the existing law sets out specifically what travel expenses would be acceptable. So the travel expenses relating to one round trip, so like costs of flight or gas or whatever, however the commuting is done, costs of meals incurred on that round trip, and then potentially temporary lodging if the person maintains their existing lodging in their ordinary place of residence. So those are the ways that those concerns were addressed through the deduction that was passed through Bill C-19.
Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, MP Sainte-Marie.
Questioner, we're back to NDP MP Daniel Blakey.
Thank you very much. So I just want to kind of continue on down the table here. So when we talk about distance calculation under the two laws, there's some additional conditions for what's currently in statute, including relocation to a temporary work location, being away from your ordinary residence for at least 36 hours, and residence at a temporary lodging. So again, like I'm thinking about somebody who's working on a project in Portage la Prairie, say, and is commuting daily out of Winnipeg. So they're traveling over 120 or even over 150 kilometers from their home in order to go to a job. The Briquette Pea plant was a big job in the Portage la Prairie area for a while. I know a number of guys that were working on that job for a couple of years. So under 241, they would have been allowed to deduct those expenses to travel to that site, but under the current statute, they would not, because they're not away from their home for 36 hours and they're not residing in a temporary lodging. Is that a fair kind of characterization of the difference between the two proposals?
That's right. The existing deduction does not allow daily commuting expenses on the basis that that's considered a personal expense for all employees, regardless of their industry.
Another characteristic in the table here is the nature of the eligible expenses. So under the current provision, eligible temporary relocation expenses, including, so I think these were mentioned, transportation expenses of one round trip, meals during the round trip, and temporary lodging. And under 241, it says expenses incurred for traveling to and from the job site. So what would be what would be the practical difference? Is it that under 241 you could have a job that's just relatively far from home but still within a commuting range and deduct some of those expenses?
That's one difference. There's a question in my mind. Exactly. This would again be up to the CRA to interpret what it means in terms of travel expenses to and from the work site. It's not entirely clear to me whether that would include lodging if they did choose to stay overnight. But that would be something that the CRA would have to provide guidance on, I think.
Okay. If I were self-employed, it was my own business, and I was traveling to a job in Portage, would I be able to claim like gas and mileage and meals even if I'm returning to my principal residence at the end of the day?
If it was daily commuting, it would not be deductible. If it was just sort of a one-off job that they were doing for the day or Lindsay can maybe jump in. She's more familiar with the business
Well, if it's
side,
my
but-
company and I'm hired to do a job out in Portage La Prairie and the job's going to last for 2 months, say, like, is there a threshold in the current income tax law where that becomes a regular commute as opposed to a temporary job? Like, every job in construction is temporary. You're always working yourself out of a job. There is no permanent construction job. And, you know, that's a maintenance job, right? So as long as you're doing construction, it's a temporary job.
Yeah, I mean, the general rule is that.
For the House of Commons.
Yeah, so the general rule is that if it's a personal expense, it's not deductible, even if you're carrying on a business, and that's interpreted to mean if you're commuting to and from work, that any of those expenses are not deductible. I don't know exactly where the CRA draws that line in terms of how, in terms of like if you are working at different places, every couple of months, exactly where they draw that line. But the general rule is that travel between work and home is not deductible for business purposes as well as employment purposes.
Thank you, MP Blake. I do want to thank the
Mr. Chair,
witnesses.
just a point of order before you excuse the witnesses.
A point of order?
Yeah, you put in committee business at the end without giving us notice. I believe you need unanimous consent to do that. I think these witnesses are doing a fantastic job, and so I would like the remainder.
Is that necessary? No, it is not necessary, MP Lawrence. So just to thank the witnesses and thank you for your testimony. Thank you for the many technical questions you answered. I know that you're going to come back to members. I think they ask about definitions and some of the other information that members are requiring. So if you can bring that back to our committee, that would be terrific. And now we're going to excuse and allow our witnesses to exit. And we thank you very much. Thank you. And members, we are going to have just I see MP Beach's hand up just quickly. Yeah, we're going to have a quick discussion. Right now, I just want to inform the members that we have worked with the Governor of the Bank of Canada and on scheduling, and happy to let everybody know that the Governor will be available to come before us on November 23rd for a meeting here. So, and now to look, as I said, we're going to carve out a little bit of time here for future business. I do have MP Beach's hand up.
Canceling myself out. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion that I gave to the clerk, and feel free to distribute that. I have also provided this motion to all parties, and we've had discussions over the last 24 hours, but I will read it now.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe there was 2 days' notice as is required, and so it's out of order.
I think we're in committee business.
MP Lawrence, you are right about the 2 days, but we are in committee business and we can discuss committee business.
Sorry, point of order,
MP
Mr.
Beach,
Chair.
yes.
So at any point, the Liberal chair can call committee business and put in any motion he wants. That doesn't sound correct, and I don't think that's consistent with Bosch and Gagnon.
So MP Lawrence, it could be any chair, and any member may bring forward any motion and any business that they would like. And at this time, MP Beach has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll read that motion now. That the chair schedule meetings to initiate a pre-study on the Act to implement certain provisions of the Fall Economic Statement, and that the first meeting take place on Monday, November 14th, should legislation be presented in the House by that time, and that the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance be invited to appear with her officials on the bill, and that all evidence gathered as part of the pre-study be considered as evidence in the committee's fall study of the bill. Mr. Chair, this is a motion that is very similar to what we did with the budget, just to make sure that we can get to the important business of the Fall Economic Statement when it lands. And there have been discussions. I think we're all aware of where those discussions are at. So I think we can all agree that very shortly, I think we're going to see where this is heading. And if it's getting to a point where the Conservatives have to hold the floor,
more than willing to suspend in committee business and try to resolve this amicably over the next couple of days. But with that, I'll cede the floor.
Do MP Beach, or do we have MP Lawrence? And then MP Morantz.
Thank you. So I believe that we, and I would thank the member for his good faith discussions with myself off of committee time here, but I think we do need additional time, and so I would agree with members' offer to suspend and come back on Monday, and we can further discuss this motion.
Thank you, MP Lawrence. MP Morantz?
Just cede your time. Just cede your time right now.
I'll cede my time.
Okay. So, yep.
Clarify if that was a motion to adjourn the meeting or
So, yeah, we're trying to get some clarification.
I'm happy
in
to
terms of
clarify,
was
Mr.
that to suspend, and then you can have your discussion?
So where this currently stands is that, just to open the kimono to everybody that might be watching this, there's some procedural stuff that's involved, and some of my members might even be confused. It's a good point. And thank you for your advice too, Daniel. But basically what is happening is that there is a disagreement. I put this motion on the floor. Certainly the government wants to proceed with the FES. There is because I believe that we have the majority of supportive members around the table, the only way that the Conservatives would be able to stop us from moving forward in this method would be to filibuster at this committee. And I am trying to respect everyone's time and all members of Parliament so that we don't have to go through that show, and we can simply suspend as we are with the Conservatives holding the floor, and we're going to have some chats. It's probably a unanimous consent thing, I would imagine.
Okay, so I've heard the members loud and clear. We will suspend.